6:44. But first, we bring on our good friend Mike McAllister. And Mike, rough weekend for SU basketball fans. Unfortunately, we got to start there. Rough weekend for Bills fans too. We'll get to that later in the show. What are your takeaways from that loss to BC on Saturday?
I think it was frustration was the biggest thing that I took away from that, just because it felt like they were the better team, and that the whole reason Boston College was in that game and able to hang around, force overtime, and win in overtime was all on Syracuse's doing. You know, I understand Boston College had a couple of players that had good games and whatever else, but that felt largely like Syracuse handed it to them when the game was right there to be won multiple times, where they extend the lead out to 7 or 9 points, feel like they were about to start pulling away and put the game away, and then they turn it over like 3 or 4 plays in a row. And it was just incredibly frustrating, because all of the work that they had done the last 5-6 games to really get into a position where they were getting into a favorable spot in the net rankings and all the analytics and everything else, all of that was undone by one game, where Syracuse basically got in its own way. And it's one thing if you lose to a team that's better than you, or some guy has a 35, 40-point night and just, beats you unexpectedly. It's another when you do it to yourself. That's the most frustrating part, is you feel like the team is there's more talent on this team that should prevent a performance like that.
What do you make of the last sequence of regulation? We heard Red yesterday said that the plan was to foul. So, Donnie Freeman misses the free throw with 18 seconds left. They called, BC calls timeout right after that. So there's, 16, 17 seconds left. And we saw what happened, right? They make a three with about 7 seconds to go. What do you make of, what should have happened, and what do you think, when Red says that they should have fouled, do you think he means right away? Do you think he means, I took that as when they start their action, you foul, and they were unable to, just the way that the play developed. But what do you make of that last sequence of regulation? Yeah,
I'm kind of with you on that it seems like that's the best time to foul, when they start their action. Now, from a global perspective, is it better to foul when you're up by 3 in the final 10 seconds or not? I go back and forth on that, especially when you're not a great free throw shooting team yourself and haven't shot the ball well from the free throw line in that particular game. I understand why there could be some hesitation there, but they had an issue last year, I seem to remember, and I can't remember if it was Boston College or not, where someone hit a tying 3 late in the game that sent it into overtime, and Autry said in the postgame that the plan was to foul, and they didn't. And it was either last year or the year before.
It was last year, because I remember seeing it on him telling them that was a home game, and I would remember him telling them to foul, and they didn't.
Right. So if that happened again, he tells them to foul and they didn't. Is there some sort of breakdown? Are they not hearing him clearly? Are they not practicing exactly how you do that in practice? I'm not 100% sure, but 2 years in a row, the exact same type of situation, and you have the exact same outcome with you're supposed to foul and don't. There's some sort of breakdown somewhere from there, and it's different players too, right? I know obviously JJ's the same, but something's got to be fixed there so that when you're in that situation again, because they could be at some point this season, that you don't let that happen, that whatever the plan is actually followed through upon by the players.
I know it's easy, in hindsight to look back and say, why was that player in the game or this player in the game? But I'm going to ask you anyway about Nathan George. I mean, at what point do you sit him on the bench if you're Adrian Autry? And I get that in crunch time you want to have the guys you trust the most out there, but it's gotten to the point where you don't know what to expect out of him. I mean, he turned the ball over 7 times, and including the last play of regulation after BC tied it, just kind of an out of control play and loses the ball. I guess put your head coach hat on here for a second. If you're Adrian Autry, do you continue to stick with Nathan George in key spots?
I think globally, you sort of take the macro look at it, yes, but I think you have to have the ability to change that in an individual game. So in previous games like the Georgia Tech game and the Pitt game, et cetera, I thought he was playing really well in those games. And so when you're in crunch time in those situations, I'm comfortable leaving him in given how he had played to that point. But he wasn't playing well against Boston College. He was struggling all game, shooting the ball, decision-making, turnovers, all of it. So if I'm Adrian Autry or if I'm the head coach at that given moment, I'm fine with saying, JJ, you're going to play the one down the stretch here in the last couple of minutes. And, you sit Nate down, and then, you either talk to him right then or you talk to him afterwards and say, listen, I still trust you. I still have your back, and you're still our starting point guard. But sometimes in individual games, you're just not at your best, and I needed someone who was. And so, yeah, I sat you for the last couple of minutes of this game, but I fully expect that next game you're going to come out, play like you had in the last few games, and that we'll be able to put you back out there in those situations. And
how do you feel about the? Oh, sorry.
Well, go ahead.
How do you feel about the line changes that seem to happen at the same time in the first half and second half of every game that this coaching staff does?
I heard you earlier say that it feels like it crushes momentum, and I tend to agree with you. I'm not saying that means don't sub at all, but maybe instead of bringing in 3 or 4 players, you bring in 1, right? Maybe throw in Kyan and take out, either JJ or Nate George and go from there, or put him in instead of Nate Kings, depending on what your situation is. Maybe bring in a Tyler Betsy, and if you're going to play, Donnie Freeman at the 5 for a little bit, or whatever the situation is. But substituting 3 or 4 players out, like you said, that kills your momentum, that kills your rhythm, and it's so much harder to ramp that back up, I think, is the other part of this, right? It's one thing to hurt your momentum. It's another to understand that when you bring in 3 or 4 guys that are all on the bench and aren't warmed up and in the thick of it at that moment, it's going to take them a little bit to kind of get in the flow of things. So if you kind of do that one at a time, it feels like that might be the better approach. But again, I'm not a coach. That's just my opinion of how I would do it if I was running things. But the result, at least the last game, seems to support that the wholesale changes don't always work.
Yeah, it also feels like the substitutions are scheduled. Like, we've seen multiple games where JJ is just lighting it up, comes out, scores the first 5 buckets, and then he's out. He's the first player out, and it's not George. It feels like, I don't know. Do you see that also?
Yeah, I don't know whether for a fact it is or not. I will say at times it has felt like it is, to your point. And that's, I think part of being a head coach is having a feel for those types of things. And it's entirely possible that that's not the case. It has felt like that at times. I don't know either way, but, I think part of any development as a head coach, and we have to remember, right, Red is in year 3 as a head coach. I get the impatience and everything else, but it's not like this is year 15 of him, right? So some of these things are things I think that you learn and develop over time, and some of that is the feel for when to take a guy out, when to put a guy in. And if JJ comes out and scores 10 points in the first 5 minutes, and your normal pattern is, at the under 16 timeout or whatever it is that you're going to take JJ out, maybe in that one instance you don't. And part of that is just sort of a feel for things. And, it will point back to Jim Boeheim. I thought that was something he was really good at, was kind of having a feel for someone who was playing like that and leaving him out there for a little bit of extra time.
You brought up guys come out after they make shots. We saw in the BC game Saturday, Paulie, there was less than 5 minutes to go. It was 4:53 on the clock. Nate Kings had a basket and a foul, made the free throw, 3-point play, and then as soon as he made the free throw, he came out. Was that the play you were talking about?
I don't know if he called out, but he definitely went to the bench and got his puffer.
Okay.
So I don't know.
So that could have been the reason for that.
But,
okay.
But yeah, I also don't know if that's the fact, though. That's why he came out. He might just do that every time he comes out of the game.
Okay. That's interesting because that was obviously you're in crunch time minutes at that point. It was a tie game. He broke the tie with the basket and the foul, and then came out. So I do wonder if he might have asked to come out in that situation, because that would have seemed odd. When you look at that loss as it pertains to SU's NCAA tournament chances, Mike, how does this change, in your opinion, what they need to do from here on out?
Certainly hurts their margin for error, for sure. Now, they didn't drop quite as much in the net as I thought that they were going to. I think losing on the road helps with that a little bit, because the net doesn't hurt you quite as much when you lose a game on the road, even if it is to an inferior team. but they've got the meat of their schedule coming up. We've been talking about it all year, and you guys have talked about it, and we talked about it going into the season, that their most difficult stretch in conference play is the back end of their conference schedule. So if you can win the next couple of games against good Virginia Tech and Miami teams, then you got to win that Notre Dame game as well. Then you set yourself up for maybe only needing a couple of those big games in order to get yourself on the right side. I don't know what the magic number is. That's part of the thing too, right? Is we haven't taken where Syracuse is and compared it to all of the so-called other bubble teams and where they're at and what their upcoming schedule is. So we're looking at this in a vacuum, and we're sort of projecting what we think. My guess is if they got to 4 quad 1 wins, that would probably put them in a good spot. But I think you also have to be competitive in those quad 1 games that you don't win, because the other part of this is when you lose a game like that, you take part of the argument of, well, all of the games that they had lost was when Donnie Freeman wasn't there, or he hadn't started and was just coming back from injury. So the committee can take that into account, right? You didn't have Donnie Freeman for the Houston game. You didn't have him for the Hofstra game or Kansas, etc. But if you lose to Boston College, and then down the stretch of the season, you're playing the more difficult teams in your conference schedule, and you're not winning enough of them and or getting blown out in several of them, that makes it much more difficult for the committee to take that into account. That's going to hurt your analytics, etc. as well. But if you want to put yourself in a good position, you win a few of these games, you're competitive in a vast majority of them, you see where you stand, and then you try to use that Donnie Freeman argument as an asset of yours as well.
All right, let's talk. Yeah,
he just kind of
he
argued on both sides of our argument right there.
Yes.
I agree. If they get 4 quad 1 wins, I think they're going to be okay.
Yeah, it's we'll find out. But
that's a huge task, though. They got one coming up in 2 games.
Yep.
For now, but there's no guarantee that's going to stay.
But you got to win it, even if it's a quad 2.
Yes, you do have to win it. You got to keep winning. You got to keep winning. There's no doubt about it. Go ahead, Mike. What were you going to say? We'll give me the last word on basketball, and then we'll switch gears and we'll talk football here.
Yeah, just one more comment on the substitution thing. I think it's okay to have a plan going into a game as far as your substitution patterns. Like, hey, at the 15-minute mark, I plan on bringing these guys in. I think you need to be able to modify that plan as the game goes. In the scenario as Paulie outlined, where JJ comes out and is hot, maybe I'm not going to sub him out right now. I'm going to let him go for another few minutes.
Yeah, that's calling audible.
All right, let's talk some football. And we heard Fran say that he wanted to bring in at least 2 quarterbacks out of the portal. He has done that. What do you make of Malachi Nelson? Former highly touted recruit. This is going to be his 4th school. What can you tell us about him, and what do you make of the move?
Yeah, I think when you look at the quarterbacks as a whole, it's kind of similar to what I expected going in, right? You got the one guy who was a starter last year who put up some really good numbers and was, sought after in the transfer portal, and even though he's moving up a level. And then you have a guy like Malachi Nelson, who is a former highly touted recruit who didn't play really at his first couple of stops, played last year, had some up and down moments. But still, everyone goes back to that former 5-star player, top recruit, etc., and say, is there still untapped potential there? Is there still stuff that you can get out of him? And so, sometimes players are as much a product of their environment as they are anything else, and you just haven't found the place where you can put it all together. We've seen that at the NFL level, right? Sam Darnold with the New York Jets just really could never get anything going, didn't look good. Everyone kind of wrote him off as being a bust. Then he goes to Minnesota, has a great year, turns that into a big contract with Seattle, and now they're 1 win away from playing in the Super Bowl. So sometimes if you have that talent as your benchmark and you get to the right place to bring that out of you, you can put it all together. So I think Syracuse certainly hoping that can come to fruition. And then, of course, you get the kid from Georgetown who's coming up from an FCS school as well, who has starting experience. So I think they did a nice job overall at mixing the former highly touted recruit that hasn't put it all together yet with guys with starting experience that have been productive.
Quarterback position aside, Mike, what do you make of what they've accomplished in the portal to this point?
Well, the first thing is the drama with the tight end position with Michael Smith.
Yeah.
That was kind of a
What can you tell us? Yeah, what can you tell us about what happened there?
Yeah, I don't know a ton of the specifics other than kind of what's been reported, which is that, he signed with Syracuse. There's some binding agreements, but I know all of these agreements have out clauses or buyouts, et cetera. He, I guess, wanted to just stay at South Carolina, change his mind, and thought he could just enroll in South Carolina and be good. But then Syracuse wasn't going to let him out of that. And all of a sudden, a few days later, he ends up at Ole Miss. So I don't know exactly what the specifics are. Was some sort of buyout paid to Syracuse? I don't know. But yeah, just kind of a crazy situation. And I think you'll start seeing more and more of these things pop up year after year with just the way that the transfer portal goes, and with this one window where everything's kind of, strung into a jam-packed 2-week period where everyone's kind of going crazy, and it's this free agency frenzy, so to speak. But outside of that, I think they did a really nice job getting pass rushers and upgrading their defensive line. Keyshawn Johnson from UT Martin was one of the most sought-after pass rushers in the transfer portal, had 13 sacks last year, FCS All-American. Then the kid from UNLV, former top 100 overall recruit, tons of potential, 6'6", really good edge rusher, finally puts it together last year, and I think is ready for an even bigger breakout year this upcoming season. And then the guys that they got in the middle of the defensive line too. Defensive tackle might not be a sexy position, but all of a sudden fans get really concerned about it when teams are running for 200 or 300 yards on you. So the guys that they got, there's some connections to some of the new coaches that they brought on, and they're big guys, and certainly shore up their depth in the middle of the defensive line.
Steve, I just want to say I'm maturing as a host. I did not ask Mike what a sexy position is.
Thank you for holding on.
All right, thanks.
Mike, great stuff as always. We love having you on. Thank you for the time. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.